So, we did talk about that a little bit. They want to bring in a fourth unit, but they want a city to do an exclusive contract with them. We know our charter doesn't allow for exclusivity. The county can do what they want, but that doesn't give us the same coverage.
If the county, can we MOU it or anything like that?
I think we can.
And not.
And not violate our.
Yeah, it's not, I don't say a get around, but to get around the.
But we have to figure that out because what do we do with our current contract? Do we MOU all of the services out to the county?
I'm not well versed in how the contract is right now. But
one of the things
I know the contract's up, so it can start fresh however it needs to be done. I just don't know what the best route would be.
I'll say this, and I don't know what your influence is there, but more than a fourth ambulance, they need to get radios in their existing ones. All of their failures that we report, and I'm not gonna say failures because I guess they don't fail. Everything that is above our contracted time is usually a radio breakdown or they can't find a location, and since they don't have radios, we're not getting good communication with them. So we need that more than a fourth ambulance, honestly. And I wish Lee was here, she could probably speak to that more, but
I think that would be something that needs to be discussed in the contract, regardless of whether it's city or county.
Okay.
It needs to be brought to their attention and be part of, like, say, if we're going to continue to do this for this period of time, this is what we're going to need to ensure.
That would be a requirement that the radios are compatible with police and fire and everybody else, because with the CAD system, you can look at the screen and they can tell us people where they're.
Yeah, the chief may know more about this too, sorry. Do you have anything to add? We were talking about the not being up to snuff, and they don't have the CAD system basically, so they can't figure out where they're going. And it's not a poor performance issue. They do find probably 99% of the time, but they need radios. So, and forget it.
It's too early for that.
Yeah.
This is not your show, Chief. This is their show. So when we get back to your show, we'll talk about radios. Okay?
Maybe we should have started there.
Okay. All right. We're going to put a pin in health and safety and move forward because this could be a circuitous discussion. We talked about customer service a little bit, internal customer service. This is kind of my baby to work on. Does anybody have anything to add here? Something you want to see, something you need done, a deficiency that you're aware of? What do you want our customer service to be?
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's what you guys are doing online has been great. I just want to see more and like continued consistency with that. And if there's anything additionally that needs to be supported to really push that information out there to let us know. So I think that's been a really big thing.
I think just the consistency. The complaints I see is just that one employee that, customer service wise answers the phone and they do a great job, and then the next one is not very helpful, or so just make sure that the employees know that every customer matters. Be consistent with all your communication with everyone.
Okay. And we have some things lined up for this to make sure that our technology is keeping up, that will allow for better customer service, and some trainings lined up, and we'll work on this. Okay. Preserve and enhance natural resources. Over here you said work through these groups for funding opportunities. Is there anything else we want to add to preserve and enhance natural resources?
Ryan, you want to talk on the one we just did, or work it through?
You just want that.
What's that? Sorry.
We're talking about preserving, enhancing natural resources. We did just pass an ordinance to work, to put,
Charlie? Yes, sir.
what else you got going on there? We wanna put native species in the right of ways.
We met with, Mr. Belair last week, 2 weeks ago, and not only were we gonna do the right of ways, but he was looking at some areas along some of our shorelines and, drainage areas, and doing the same thing, just adding,
kind of the opposite of xeriscaping. It's just like native plants and beautification, natural filtration, right, Brad?
Yes, sir.
And like maybe doing this like at the last entry points going into Little Bay. So like this big strip of property at Little Bay, off of Broadway, like enhancing that whole median.
Put in a natural filtration.
Yeah, and pretty plants, something visual, something good, you know. I think that's in Brad's board. So we might have to go and,
Sorry, I'm not as good at this as the facilitator,
but we might have to go out there and do some door knocking and talk to his constituents and tell them.
Just make sure
Be the front door.
it looks good to them. It'll be, right now it's in a drainage ditch swell.
Yeah.
And, just basically enhance that with native beautification, plants that flower year round.
And filtration.
And filtration, you know, we're gonna do it around where the great inlets are, and then we looked at other areas in the city where great inlets are, closer to where the outfalls are, so we can get that last bit of natural filtration. And, it is of no cost to the city, it is all coming through them, so.
And it's walking billboard is saying what we're doing to prevent, you know, pollutants.
Yeah, sorry, that's right, you also put a sign up that says,
this is what it is.
this is what it is.
Look what Brad did.
No, look what Ryan did. Look what Ryan did. Look what Ryan did.
Let's talk about trees a little bit. We're in a conundrum with trees. We're in a drought. We want trees planted. You have to water new trees. What would be a vision for addressing the trees in the?
Well, I guess we talked about that at the tree committee meeting last week, because we said we can't plant trees right now, it's just the drought, and we can't water them, they're just gonna die, especially how small they plant them. They had a few ideas, like to be bigger trees that can support like the watering bags or support things like that. But I mean, that is something that we definitely have to like work on. They didn't really come up with like an answer, but it was definitely a discussion. We have all this money in mitigation to plant these trees, and
Well, and we also require, landscaping from our developers, and I think we need to at least get a philosophy. You know, you owe us landscaping, but you don't plant until we're back to stage 1 or whatever, or.
That's what we told them, that we weren't going to require it at this time, but once stage 3 is done, then they'll have, I don't remember, we get 30 or 60 days to get it planted.
I think it was 60.
What was it?
It was 60.
60 days.
And then given the overall larger water situation, what philosophy do we want to adopt there? We need to really think about how we're using our potable water. So maybe, would you mind if I put up here like a, landscaping, yes,
Xeriscape,
you can.
xeriscaping certainly during stage 3.
Xeriscape though does not include oak trees.
Correct.
So, yes ma'am.
So, Trey sent me Trey Summers sent me a copy of the Corpus restrictions, and they did an exemption for the new plantings for, I noticed the Kokomo store planted their trees over the weekend. So, I mean, they're gonna have to water them.
Do we do an exemption? Okay.
And we're not going to because it's a no.
Well, I agree they should not, but I'm talking about like homeowners, we have to do the grass around the foundation to keep that from washing away. And we're trying to figure out, we're not making them do that because they can't water. So they can put another thing. didn't know if we wanted to do that exemption for new construction.
Okay.
We're gonna get exemptions every day, all day long, and then we're supposed to be reducing our water by percentage. I know we sell water, but we're working in the opposite direction. If we give one, we're gonna open Pandora's.
When's your tree giveaway, Brittany? Okay, we got some time. Okay, so what if I just put up here that, staff will work on a policy, and we'll bring it back to you guys.
We're doing the new drought contingency plan right now.
Okay.
We're modifying it. We have a couple, probably not this council meeting, but it'll be on the next council meeting. We'd like to get it out to everybody, but it's pretty much Corpus Christi's, with some wordsmithing. But we're due, and we've been waiting for Corpus to adopt their new one. They were trying to do it mid-drought, which is a horrible idea, but they're getting the pushback that, we're getting too. So it's gonna be the new plan, and
Okay. When we get that, then we'll look at a philosophy of how we're gonna handle it as a whole. We'll take the input from the tree committee meeting. Ryan, Carey, new developments, things like that, and we'll try to pull it all together and make not necessarily a formal policy, yes, a policy, how we're gonna act towards new planting and landscaping during the drought.
Brian, you're saying the exemption, you don't want exemptions for people to be able to water?
Period, yeah.
Period, it's not, I think the better exemption is what y'all are talking about, is not requiring the planting of.
He
Well,
doesn't
I
wanna
think that's
use
what
more
they're
water.
doing right now, the whole goal is to reduce the water, but building and development has the ability to do the exemption there to where they don't have to accept their policies, like, hey, you don't have to plant grass.
Right. But when we get out of drought, I want there to be a hook. Now you have to come
Now
back
you
to
have
do
to-
it.
Correct, and I think that's the way to do it, because we can do both. We'll give them leniency on the permanent side, and that's what y'all been doing,
I do
right?
have a question. They're still permitting pools like nobody's business. And I just feel like we need to not be permitting pools.
What does Corpus say?
They permanent thing.
Can you withhold that permit for a
Yeah.
pool?
I don't know.
That's private property.
I think what we should do
I can
is
ask.
have a group. Corpus was changing their policy all through the drought because of the political influence they were getting, and they were letting industry use a lot of water and backing the residents, and was taking all the hits. No, you can't water. This is a must use to run industry, and watering is not,
Well, we need to,
qualified as emergency use.
So Shelley made a point, like, what if you, require people to have to bring their own water into the pools?
truck it, yeah.
Like, they have to do that, she said that,
But how can they run it through their filtration system?
that's what did they do it?
Right now it says not recommended.
Okay,
But we're fixing to maybe go into 4. I think when we take this down, so staff needs help too, also enforcing this, because we try to enforce one thing, it comes over the top and it kind of pinches on, us in the middle, like, what do y'all want to see?
so that's why I'm saying we need to come up with something that doesn't sway to the political pressure, that is best for the city and best for our water use, and it needs to be written, and then you guys have it in hand from council to enforce.
We don't want to make a decision that, you're gonna turn around and try to say, hey, no, this is the wrong decision. We want to make a cohesive decision saying, yeah, I know this is what the council wants, this is what, Vanessa wants, and this is what we're gonna stick to. Because a lot of times we make a decision based on what's best for the city, well, they're not gonna like that, people that, you all have.
I think whatever Corpus is doing is probably a real good start. Obviously, we don't have the industrial customers that they have to sell water to, but, that's who we're essentially buying our water from.
Would y'all like us to send you the plan? It's 40 or 50 pages long, but there's sections. Candace can sit it out to y'all to look at it before we put it on the agenda, because it's.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We'll send you Corpus's out, and you can read that. and start working, and it's just gonna be replace Corpus with Rockport.
Yeah.
And then when we get we're gonna work on changing everything out.
Okay, let's do that.
I think it's a great start. It's a great place to start already at the wheel.
And that's how we've always done it. You can look at Sandpac's, Corpus Christi's, and ours, and they're the exact same. And that's, when you hear it on the news, we should be doing the same thing, unless they're changing it during the drought.
That's what I'm saying.
We can't chase that.
Right. If Corpus is swaying, we can't sway. We need a clear path. A clear, consistent path.
But I'd like to talk about all the stages
Okay.
and go all the way up to 4. Like realistically, stage 4, that development shouldn't be going on at all. And that's gonna be something that is gonna be, you already hear it out there, like moratoriums. I know that's a bad word, but that might be something that our new water accounts or that's gonna be a tough decision for us as staff to make without the backing.
Because also, we depend on water being sold. You know, we're cutting ourselves both ways.
The only way we can actually supplement that is being so enforcing on that and finding people. And we try not to do it like the chief says about writing tickets when you change something. We're not out there trying to hurt the people we serve, but if they're breaking the rules, then we have to do something.
Right. Okay, anything else on natural resources? Do we want to talk about bays, oceans, oysters?
Is that really our wheelhouse?
I'm sorry?
Is that our wheelhouse or?
No.
I would just say we leave that up with the stormwater technical committee and whatever
Perfect.
comes back to us from them.
Great, it's listed over there. I think that's a great idea. Okay. All right, we're gonna close this out. Remember, we have a mission and goals. Do we want to take this now and develop a vision? Or do we want to just take it and have subsets under our mission?
I think it's easier to refer to it to get where it is in our plan if it goes with our mission as topics under the individual division.
Okay, we want to just stick with the mission for now? You want a vision? Anybody? Mayor's made his position known. Are we going with this?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great, love it. You're done with this. All right, Robbie's next. We're gonna talk about our financial position going into this budget year, like we did last year. If you have questions, ask Robbie.
We received our preliminary numbers from the chief appraiser Friday, excuse me.
Thursday.
A little early.
Were you here Friday?
Not Friday, Thursday, sorry. I was here in spirit. Lots of spirits. Baby Black. Beer. Okay, gonna kind of use the same framework as we did last year, just kind of roll this forward and it's a little more expanded. The purpose of this is one, talk about where we are, and then also from an educational standpoint, to further educate everyone in terms of what we're working with and our constraints. And please advance it, Bob. Utilize the latest information available. We do have the preliminary rolls, and that the tax rates that we're showing do not include the preliminary rolls because we just got them. So it's going to be talking about the current rates. Next one, please. Just kind of overall, talk about information education. We're also going to be talking about economic conditions and inflation, which we are all feeling. Talking about general fund balances, which I know council's very cognizant about. Major revenues, talk about current processes and contracts pressuring the budget. Oops. We'll look at where we are currently as of 3/31, halfway through the year, and where the departments are with their budgets. We'll talk about budget financial priorities, the water and sewer rates. Council approved a 5 years worth of rates. We're starting our second year. We'll look at the budget calendar and talk about what we need to do as a group. Next one, please. Economic conditions, talking about Federal Reserve meeting. Basically what they're saying is there's some fears about stagflation. They're also expecting inflation to persist into next year. Rate cuts are going to revise down to probably 25 basis points cuts next year. So really what they're kind of saying is it's kind of more of the same, unfortunately. I know we'd like things to get better faster, but there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. Next one, please. We looked at this last year. The red line is 3.5%, which is what our M&O has, as much as we can go over on our M&O side of the tax rate. And you can see how we're still, even though inflation has come down, we're still butting up against the 3.5%. If you take that apex where it goes up to 9% and you spread it over all those other lower rates that are under that red bar, it would completely consume it. So you can see that from 18 to beginning 2025, that inflation spike there ate up anything that we could have. If we went 3.5% every year, it ate that up just in that time frame. It's basically a huge gut punch, to say the least. Again, driven largely because of irresponsible fiscal spending, as has been pointed out by DOGE. Next one, please. This is just an independent, another entity that has done a report on economic conditions. Basically, it's saying things are going to continue. Don't see anything really changing in the near future. Just another entity speaking to the economy. Next one, please. This is also showing where the Fed was slow in catching up, raising rates to stave off inflation. You can see where in their circle where the inflation spiked before they raised the rates, further exacerbating the situation, causing the inflation to be as high as it was. Next one, please. This is a letter from TCAP showing what they're expecting, giving us it's a letter from them talking about that we need to expect an increase in our electric rates of 8.7% next year. That is just showing further what we're looking at and the pressures that we're gonna have. Hopefully, with that House Bill 2962, if the miscellaneous gross receipts tax does go through, we'll get about a 2% relief, but still that's not going to make up at 8.7%. We're still going to be over. So just kind of showing we're still chewing into what we have available, our flexibility. Next slide, please. This is showing our current property taxes. We're basically at 58-42 split from M&O versus INS. Policy really speaks to a 60-40 split. So we're just a little bit over that. We talked about our M&O being capped at 3.5% and INS that's not capped. Next slide, please. Total Rockport tax rate, showing basically where we are at the 0.40529 at the bottom. If you start adding on Aransas County, the school, you can see how much what our contribution, I guess you will, is. Next slide, please. This shows it from a percentage standpoint. Basically, the city of Rockport for the Rockport total tax bill is about 25%, or 26% if you wish. School districts running just under 50%. So when people talk about the city's raising our taxes, we're a quarter of it. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is showing the orange graph shows where we would be where we'd be if we were at our 180 days. The blue is where we are, so we're still not at 180 days.
So we haven't been at 180 days since 2017, ever.
No, we have not. We did make some ground on the 2023 audit. We went up 316,000, so that's good. We're going the right direction. But it's still small in comparison with where we need to be. Next slide, please. Major revenues, basically defined as 75% of your total revenues. The property tax takes up is about 40%, sales tax 26%, and transfers in from other funds is about 9%. That's kind of what that breakdown comes. The remainders of those percentages are usually special revenue funds or restricted. Utility fund, charges for service, of course, sale of water, sewer is 96%. And those are not doing real well right now. Next slide, please. We talked about property tax revenues. They are the most stable and predictable source of revenues as derived from non-exchange or taxes. Since in 2022, the homestead exemption is now prorated, people who do homestead exemptions, and that even includes a 2-year look back. So there are months where the city receives no property taxes because of people getting refunds for prior years. That has really undermined property taxes also from trying to forecast. It's hard. And I talked to Anna this morning, and she said it's getting worse, that more and more people are doing this. Again, the M&O site is not restricted. Those monies are monies that we can do many things with. It's not, whereas the INS site is restricted, we can't do anything with those monies. That's strictly for debt service. That M&O site can be used for the 380 agreements that we have. We can't use the INS site for those. So not all the money that we get or property tax revenues that we get, we can use for city purposes. They're for city purposes, but they're restricted in terms of what we can do with them. We can't funding operations with them or anything like that. Next slide, please. This is showing freeze adjusted taxable. I misspelled that, my bad. Basically what it's showing is that the freeze adjusted taxable values are now are slowing the rate of growth. It's just 5% for 2024, the lowest since 2018. Next slide, please. New taxable values by year, that is also slowing, down 16% from 2023. And again, the new taxable values, when they go up, it does help the city. It helps with that 3.5% because we get to include that in the levy. But if they're going down or flat, 3.5%. Next slide, please. Appraisals on the roll also are slowing. So just across the board, everything is slowing down. Next slide, please. This is basically showing where the freeze adjusted taxables to the tax rate is showing the kind of the inverse relationship. When taxable values go down, in order for the city to get the same amount of tax revenues, we have to go up on the tax rate. Again, this is trying to fund operations. Ideally, the goal is to keep it as smooth as possible, and that's what you're seeing. Again, inverse relationship. We're not looking at any tax increments for 2025 at this time. And talking to Anna again this morning, didn't see any of those on the horizon. And in fact, she said there's legislation out there right now that they're looking to do away with any tax increments going forward. Next slide, please. This is kind of comparing Rockport with our other area cities. You can see that we're almost like half of some of the other cities. Next slide, please. This is where we break out the M&O and the INS side, and you can kind of see where we are in relation to those cities as well. Again, we're very, very low. Next slide, please. Sales tax revenues, again, 20% of our general fund revenues. You can see that that has just basically fallen off the cliff and is flat to zero. Next slide, please. Sales tax revenues, again, less stable, as they involve exchanges. You have to have, if people are just, if they're clamped down because of inflation, you're not going to be getting a lot more tax revenue. So there's other factors that come into effect. It's not just a tax for a non-exchange transactions. Sales taxes are also, they're unrestricted and they can be used for 380 agreements. We have one of those with Ace Hardware. I think this next year's our last year too. Next slide, please. Operating transfers, again, less stable and predictable. Thank you. But those are also subject to external factors, internal factors. How well is your revenue? How well, I can't speak, are your proprietary funds doing? We're talking about water and sewer rates. If you compare where we were before we went into stage 3 water restrictions, these are year-over-year percentages. If you look at the top two, you can see that it went from 14% all the way down to minus 14%, 1% for water and sewer respectively. So, and expect for this to get worse and worse as we get more into our higher water consumption months. Okay, here is where we're looking at a 380 agreement. We're talking about some of the agreements that the city has entered into that are affecting us. You can see if you look. I don't know if I have If you look, this is assuming, say that we're a 60-40 split. And if you look at the first 4 years, you can see that with these 380 agreements, the general fund actually has to absorb, assuming 100,000 each year. Now it's a large assumption, but that in doing so, the general fund has to absorb the INS portion for the first few years until they reach where the M&O rate is, and then the city benefits. So for these agreements, like our current agreement, for the first couple of years, the general fund has to absorb that INS piece. If we want like to get council input, and we were talking earlier about treating everyone the same. Currently, we have customers who are going to be out of town for a while. They can turn off their utilities. They can literally close out their account, and they're not charged a minimum. Where there's no minimum payment, no nothing. But we still do have a line out to them. We still are monitoring their residents, and they're not paying any fire fund, water, sewer minimums, no trash. We're not getting any franchise fees. It's costing us, an estimate, it's about $1,000 per year for each active on hold customer, which are people who they have a place here, but they're not paying anything. And we're currently allowing this to happen, but it's costing us about $1,000 a year, and we'd like to revisit that. Talking about treating people equally, we're talking about utilities. They're business type entities. Over 11,000, we have over 11,000 accounts that have to be metered, read, recorded, checked for reasons, mailed, billed, and sent disconnect notices if need be, and or send people out to disconnect them. So it's a business. It's a low margin, high frequency business. So what it does is it has to be run like a machine, because this has to be done every month. And what happens is when you have customers who come in and they wanted to be treated differently or special, or have some special thing for them, and go over our heads, because we're trying to treat everybody consistently and go over our heads because they want something different. It costs money. It's a cost of service entity. And so the other customers end up having to pick that up. So we do very much try to treat everyone the same, and that is our, and good service, but treat them the same. We're talking cost of service. Some of the common things that you'll hear or that we have heard is you'll hear about paper accounts that we have. It's usually where a husband has died, who was taking care of everything. The problem with when you have a decedent is that it's a paper account. Banks don't like them. Utilities, they're tough on utilities because there's nobody that can speak for them. And so what we want to really push the citizens that if somebody does pass away, there needs to be a name on that account, because otherwise it's just a paper account and nobody can transact business. And so usually what happens is it gets disconnected, or some other thing happens and they need to make changes to the account, but they're not on it. There are deposits associated with those accounts. So it's like a bank account. You've got monies there and we're responsible for them. And so that's why we handle the things we handle utilities the way we do.
So let me just back that up and clarify. Right now, if you're not on your account, your husband's on it, your husband dies, you have to come in, close the account, open a new account in your name with a new deposit. Unless you bring a
Letters
testamentary. So
yes, we basically need a court order to do something like that.
that's how that functions at this moment.
Yes.
Now, if you're on the account, no big deal. You just.
Y'all want to change that, Robbie, or do y'all want to? I know.
Well, it's just we hear about it. It's one of the frequent things that pops up, and then what happens is people come and complain about this, that we're being unfair to them when we're not. We're trying to safeguard those monies, and so the customer needs to come in, fill out an application, pay the deposit, and put that account in their name. Then we'll take that deposit and we'll mail that deposit back to whoever's still on the account, which is, it could be the ex-spouse, and then they'll take that and they can cash it. They'll have to prove up that they can effectuate that check, cash that check.
I
Yeah,
think,
we do get that a lot. I mean,
yeah, I think
I
kind of.
I didn't know if we were just letting council know that it is a big issue.
It is, and that's why we treat it, because we have a duty of care, because there's money on that account.
I think Robbie's direction with this is every time someone is told no and they call and say they were treated poorly, they needed a favor, they are being asked to pay extra, someone was rude to them, that's not necessarily always the case. A lot of times the rules are being applied the same way, and the answer is no, however they ask. If they ask 20 times, 20 different ways, 20 different people, the answer is still, here's the procedure and we need you to follow the procedure. Because when they call, I think everybody tries to be nice and very flexible and see what we can do, but we need you to know that the staff is also, they have some level of flexibility on paying items out, making payment plans. Like I said, if someone dies, they can go get a letter testamentary if they don't want to do a new account. There's options for people, but they're consistent options. It's not, it's flexible, but it's not.
Raw too is another application that we use, a high usage rate adjustment.
Yes.
So you're gonna cover that.
Yeah, if you have a leak, we adjust your rate. So I think that's the point of what we're going through here. Every time we change the process for someone, it costs us money.
Yes.
So anyway, and he's talking to me. I'm the worst. I want to be flexible. I want to help everybody, so I get it.
Okay. Right now, we're also, in addition to that practice, we also have a contract for energy savings agreement This is the Amoresco agreement. We're in the 7th year of an 18-year lease. This currently is split 40-60 gas and wastewater. The original lease was $9 million at about a 5% interest rate. The lease payments on that thing are between $300 and $400 every 6 months.
100,000.
100,000.
You
Yes.
said $300 or $400.
Oh, I'm sorry. $300,000 and $400,000 every 6 months. The system's already at end of life, and it's requiring more and more of on-site reads and hand-holding. This is something that we're going to need to look at and address very, very soon, because it's not doing what it's supposed to do. It's end of life, and we still owe a lot of money on it. We are also going to, when we do the gas sale, we're going to have to pay off a couple of $1 million that's associated with the gas, and that's
any way out of this contract.
you can buy it out. You can purchase it, but of course it's going to be at a higher amount. This was a real dog. Taking advantage of the city. It's a dog. And you can't even adjust the hot cold on the water faucets. The toilets flush.
For the record, I had nothing to do with it.
Nor did I.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
I don't think anybody in this room did.
As Vanessa pointed out, like I think it was the last council meeting, the fire fund comparison, we did actually see a decline. That and the people participating in the fire fund. Currently the program is an opt-in. When you sign up, when you fill out your application, you're also signing up for the fire fund. We probably should do it as an opt-out, where people, when they sign up, they're automatically in it and they have to opt out of it. Because the firefighters are going to show up anyway, whether you're paying or not. But we are seeing a decline in participation.
Does anybody have any strong feelings of making it an opt-out program?
No, we have that tomorrow night to discuss. Just
Okay.
trying to figure out ways if you're Robin would bring that to us tomorrow night. Not bring up
Got it.
answer, but just
Discussion.
a discussion on that. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Contracts, all of our contracts, most of them are quite old. They've just rolled over from year to year to year to year, or over 5 years rolled over. For example, we have 2 gray water contracts. They need to be take or pay. Right now the liability is on us to provide the gray water. Really, they need to be take or pay, so maybe we have the capacity to actually execute some more contracts. So this is just something else that needs.
We have two.
We have 2.
Country Club.
Who's the other one?
Country Club and
Window caster.
good memory.
For the pasture, the pond there in the back.
Okay, here we go. Budget, this is coming off of taxes. Now we're kind of showing where we are at 50% of the way through the year. Looking at revenues. Of course, property taxes are going to be high because all property taxes are due at the end of January. Then you can kind of look at where we are within some of those other categories. Overall, about 68%, again, skewed largely because of property taxes. Sales taxes are hanging in there, but again, they're flat to slowing. Looking at general fund budgets, this is where we are with the different departments. Again, 50% of the way through. This is comparable. I look back to 39%. I thought that seems kind of low. That maybe people have too much budget, but that's not the case, because that's about where we were last year. And by the end of the year, people had spent. We were probably 95% spent, if not more. So people are spending their budget and they're on track with where they were last year. So people are executing their budgets, performing citizen services. On the utility revenue side, it's kind of where we are overall, 46%. We're within 3% of where we were last year. And again, with the rate slowing, the 46% makes sense. Expenses, again, within 3% of where we were last year. So those are a little bit lower, but still we're in a stage 3 drought. Okay, we still need financial priorities. We still need beginning balances. We're expecting to present to council the audit at the end of May. That's what we're visiting with the auditor last week. We're still below, as we talked about, in reserves. We need to probably, if we can, we need to really probably roll that pool and maybe some of the other funds into the general fund. We need to clean up the reports. We're still working on that. Because those negative funds have to be covered by the general fund. You can't just leave negative funds in there. The general fund ultimately is responsible for them. So we're going to need to cover that up, clean that up, which is also going to hurt our fund balance in general fund. Continuing to clean up the contracts, past practices or interpretations, not always in the benefit of the city. If we're going to do something, we want to do it correctly, as Vanessa likes to say. We recommend adopting voter approved rate to 3.5%. We need our turnover has dropped from 90% 2 years ago to 40% last year. That's still very high, but that was a significant drop, which attribute mostly to the cold. And again, I know everybody's under inflation pressures. We're going to have the new headquarters coming online. We need to absorb, not add the gas employees. If we keep them, we need to absorb them. So if there's spaces, if there's positions that become available, we need to hold those for the gas people if we're going to do it, because we don't have the budget. We need to continue doing the debt issuances for the B&E, the CIP, also the Rockport Volunteer Fire Department. I know we're still working on getting that up and going, but there's some monies that needed to be funded for a contract amendment. Where are we with our funding the B&E and CIP out of the tax notes? Appears to be working very well. Again, we issued about $3 million in 2024 tax notes, and we're about halfway through. We spent about half of those to date, so people are actually using their budget. The goal was to issue short-term debt at cheaper interest rates and in smaller amounts to mimic what we used to be able to do when we had an 8% capacity for the M&O side. And while that's more expensive because you have bond counsel, FNA, and other people that are looking at this, and it's not a sign by any stretch, it's a little more expensive, but certainly with the short-term interest rates, we've already more than recouped what those costs were. We do have the current salary study. We have not looked at it yet. We're meeting on that soon, but we're recommending a cost of living adjustment. And we're asking for the departments to continue scrubbing their operating budgets for any capital expenditures that we can push over to that be handled by the tax notes. Again, we don't want to be using our HEB money or our operating monies to do projects or buy capital items. We talked about the Wildan study that we're second year into 5, and we also need to incorporate the city council strategic budgets into our processes. These are the ordinances. We're going to 5-year for water and sewer. It's going to bounce through those. We don't have to give notice again going forward per ART. So we will not be sending out notices for rate increases. I think this was really smart. Working as a team, we're small. We have to work together. The people remaining after the last few years of attrition are key players now. We see that, we work with them. Everybody's doing more than what they were doing before. They picked up extra duties, taken on new tasks. we're doing what we can with what we have. So what we're asking is people have previously refrained from asking for pay increases or doing things outside the budget process. That's what this process is for. That's why we do this, and it helps us with our budgeting and getting things accurate versus doing things during the budget year, which then throw off the next budget year, because you have to track all those things individually because they're one-offs. So we want to do it all at the same time, please. Budget calendar. We're at the strategic workshop. We've already distributed the new initiative forms, and we already received the certified estimates from the appraisal district, so that's good. Any questions? Anything about the city, departmentally, individually?
A couple. One is a philosophical question, I guess, and this could be probably for you or for Bob, but you know, we haven't had our 180-day reserve since 2017 was the last police on the graph, and I don't know where we were previous to that. There's other entities in the county and or local to us that may have a large reserve balance, and is it is it good for us to have a large reserve balance and maintain our tax rate, or would that be, you know, when you grow it to a certain point, is it better to provide relief to the tax rate?
You don't want to have too much in reserves, because then it's unfairly burdening the taxpayer.
Correct.
Agreed. Right now we're under, and we can also see from those tax rates that we were showing before, Rockport is tax rate is significantly less than any of our persons around here. So no, we're not unduly burdening the taxpayers at this rate, at this point. If we were over that 180 days, or if council changed their policy, then we would adjust accordingly. But right now we're still playing catch up.
And that you know, you don't want to get too low, because I'm assuming that could affect our potential to borrow money or to go out for bonds from.
Yeah, or if we have another hurricane, or when we have another hurricane, you need some cushion to fall back on. That's one of the reasons that we were able to do what we did, especially after post Harvey. Again, I wasn't here, but with those bonds, especially with FEMA, you have to pay for those. Those are reimbursements, so you have to pay for that, and the city did. That's also one of the reasons why we're so low. Yes, sir. Because we have not, on many of those, we have not yet received reimbursement on those. We have still have receivables out there that we still have to provide the paperwork so that we can get reimbursed, which will help on that. But again, we're out the money right now, and we're struggling to maintain, as we can see, especially with inflation.
And
It's a balance, Brad,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
But I think that's why our charter sets out the 180 days. We're not trying to go above and beyond that. You know, I worked in a city that had an 18-month reserve, and it was absolutely ridiculous, because then you're not using taxpayer money for your taxpayers, you're hoarding it. So the 180 days, in my mind, is a good reserve for us, what we're doing.
What do our neighbors have? Is it 180? Is it 365? Is it 90?
I don't know what our neighbors have. I mean, I've worked in 90-day cities. I've worked in an 18-month city. I'm at a 180-day city. It can be anything, but you have to look at your economic situation.
And geographic situation.
Right.
I would say, yeah, I work with over 100 government entities. Vast majority of them typically are looking at 90 to 120 days. Rockport at 180 is appropriate because you have some climate experiences here with hurricanes and so forth. So there are cities like, for example, City of Liberty, City of Rockport, that have even more than that because they self-insure, right? So what your fund balance ought to be, what your fund balance policy ought to be, is related to what your unique circumstances are. I think that being on the coast, being subject to hurricanes, being subject to tremendously delayed FEMA reimbursements, puts you in a situation where you need to have more than 120 days. don't need, I would have to say, you don't need 18 months. But as we will discuss when I have a chance to visit, the situation in Austin has gone beyond the company. And it's going to require cities and schools and counties to have greater fund balances, if for no other reason in the world than to pay for capital outlay that you may not have any other resources to pay. And I'll discuss that in a little bit.
Does it hurt us in the bond market to be low, since 2017, to be underneath our?
It hurts you to not be in compliance with your policy.
Yeah.
And it hurts you on your bond ratings and your borrow. You can be able to borrow money. The question is, what is your credit rating? That's what your bond rating is the city's personal credit rating. And the interest rate that you pay is going to be impacted by those ratings. But you'll have access, just not as cost effective. But to me, that's really the lesser of the situation. What's more relevant is hurricane gets here tomorrow.
You want to have some money available.
You got to pay your bills, you got to clean up the city, and you got to do that knowing it could be 2, 3, 4 years where you reimburse the people.
I mean, like, give an example, like the country club president, we had to use reserve money to build that pipe they have where there was flooding.
Right.
They have no issue paying their taxes if it's gonna fix something that's gonna affect them adversely, and we have reserves to do that. If we didn't have the reserves, then they would have been, they wouldn't be able to fix that. So we have to look at, I think that residents, as long as it's gonna do them right, they're gonna be okay with what they have to pay. Make sure that we have enough to cover when something does happen.
Otherwise, it'd be special assessments for them. But we can't do special assessments, unfortunately. I mean, we can do it the hurricane rate now, but they're looking at doing away with that. There's legislation out doing away with that too.
I believe what we talked about last planning session was to get that to that 180. It was going to be, is it up there? Oh yeah, try to chip away at it, not get it all in 30 days.
5-year.
Yeah, a 5-year plan. Well, if we do get those FEMA reimbursements, what does that do for us?
It'll help with our reserves.
I mean, obviously, but
No, he's asking more specifically. I don't think we know an exact number and where it's gonna be.
No, because they settle. Whenever you apply for reimbursement, it's not, you may have been awarded a certain amount, but when it comes down to actually getting those monies, usually they come in and they chip away at it for random reasons, which you really don't have any, you don't have any say. They're just like, well, this is considered normal operation, so we're excluding this. And they'll kind of chip away at it. So usually you'll get usually a fairly high percentage, but it's not, you can't really say specifically that you will. It's been my experience.
What you've asked of us this year, though, is to add 30 days to the reserves. So we'll do the best we
just
can.
chipping away at it, trying to get us up that way. And I'm fine with 180 days. We haven't been there since 2017, or at least our knowledge 2017, and we'll make sure that we're not setting ourselves for some of them can't obtain.
Well, I would say this about one of your remarks, Brad, is about taxpayer relief. And again, we'll discuss a little bit when I'm talking about what's happening today, this morning, with House Bill 19, the Ways and Means Committee meeting in Austin. The city's latitude to be able to not simply raise revenues, but to even get voter approval to raise revenues, whether it's for debt or for tax rate ratification, either way, is getting increasingly hard. And I would say that frankly, you don't have a choice, but you have to max out your 3.5% every year. Every single year, you don't have a choice. That's going to be one of the very few tools that city governments and county governments are left with. And particularly in an inflationary period, what happened in March, our inflation rate's down to 2.4%. Probably will go back up to, I don't think it was at 3, but it'll go up a little bit because of the tariff situation. 3.5% is not keeping up with inflation there. So, and when you go back to the chart that Robbie showed of where your peer cities are, which you have to understand, 3.5% against the city of Sinton, when they've got a 90-cent tax rate, versus 3.5% on the city of Rockport's 40-cent tax rate. It's two different worlds. But not to say that Sinton's rolling in money, because they're not. They have the same kind of budgetary pressures that you guys have.
I didn't think you'd have to.
Robbie, knowing what we got on Thursday, do you anticipate the numbers changing, swinging drastically with the preliminary tax rolls that you got on Thursday? Do we see anything changing? I'm assuming everybody's evaluations went up.
Mine went down.
You went down? I wouldn't tell everybody that.
Oh, that's true. Take that.
You got special favors.
Shut it. No, I mean, minimal, but it went down.
Well, the values overall, because I worked with these numbers Friday. See, I was, just FYI.
Give Bob his sticker.
Again, Bob a sticker. So your values went up approximately 8.7%, which sounds phenomenal, sounds great, doesn't mean anything. The reason it doesn't mean anything is because we've got the 3.5% no new revenue limitation. Now, Robbie's had a chance to look at it more in depth than I did because of just our different perspectives on what we were trying to accomplish. The value, the percent increase that's attributed to new values does not get applied to that 3.5%. So to the extent that your increased values, 8.7% is a nice number, but the benefit you get from that really boils down to how much of that is real new values as opposed to reappraisals of old values. So, and I haven't looked at that breakdown yet.
And what, in our discussions, when we were having discussions on the board with the staff earlier, talking about what do we want to have as priorities, you could really feel that departments they're struggling with their budgets. I mean, it's really tight. People are cutting back in a lot of places. We can't add more staff. I know Chief wants to add like 4 more officers. We had discussions about a new person in IT, splitting people in departments. What could we do? It was just really tight, and everybody's, they want to provide more services, but 3.5%, it's not going to cut it. The thing that came out on top was a COLA for the departments because of the pressures that dealing with the existing staff. That was determined to be the number one priority by the departments. Again, yes, two years in a row. But what this is looking like is that it's going to be forcing elections at some point. That we're not going to have a choice but to have an election. And if the election fails, I think you still roll back to the 3.5%, but at least you're trying for something to where you can add more services for the community. Because right now, really, we can't. We don't have the manpower. Just wanted to share that. Any questions? Any other questions? Okay.
Pretty well.
I'm sorry?
You did a good job.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Vanessa.
All right, y'all want to take a break? We've been here an hour, a little over. And then we'll let you do that. Okay.
Some of the comments, I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible.
And that's one.
This is the same format that we used last year. In this top half, I can't quite see the heading on it, but the top table is 100% of the debt that the city of Rockport has outstanding, including the capital lease, which you see third column from the right. As we talked about last year, most of these are certificates of obligation, combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation, which means that you have absolutely total latitude as to how you pay for those debts. You can either pay for it through ad valorem property taxes, or you can pay for them through revenue system. So your total amount of debt outstanding is, including interest, is $53 million. One of the things that we've talked about in the past, and getting shorter all the time, this debt is very, very short. You can see that in 5 years, your debt service payments are going to be less than half of what they are now. The next one, if we can kind of scroll down, I don't know how to, I have the ability to do that. Okay, right there. Debt paid by interest and sinking fund taxes. Last year, because of the timing of the debt issuance of this 24 transaction, we reallocated debt to get to this $4,261,000. I pulled up the city's debt service their tax statements that was published, and I have triple checked all of these numbers. This is $4,261,000 is the amount of money that was paid out of taxes. You can see that there was nothing there for the tax notes. The next section is the debt paid by the utility system. And for purposes of, again, the budget, that's where 100% of these tax notes revenues show up. You can see again how short this stuff is that's being paid out of the utility system. There is nothing terribly magical about these percentage numbers. When the debts were originally issued, an effort was made to delineate what projects benefited the utility systems and what projects benefited the general fund, but that has long since kind of fallen by the wayside. So again, what's important to note is there's nothing magical or set in stone. As you go forward with this budget year and future budget years, and we're dealing with that 3.5% no new revenue limitation, as Ronnie pointed out, that applies to the general fund. It does not apply to the INS fund. And what we want to be able to do, help you manage that issue, is to, as consistently as possible, pay off debt out of the INS tax, which is not subject to that 3.5%. And then the next column is the debt paid by the natural gas system. In the part of the 2014's, originally about a third of that, 29%, I think it was, had been paid from the gas system. So there are some gas system revenues or improvements that were funded by the 2014 COs. And then, of course, we've got the 40.35% on the energy conservation lease. I think you know that the sale of the gas system is coming up. We've had some good bids come in. We're going to be meeting with city staff and the potential winning bidder on Wednesday. The bond attorneys are drafting up the amendments that are required to pay off this part of the energy conservation lease that's attributable to the gas system. And per state law, we're going to have to go back to the 2014s, find out how much of that was attributable to the gas system, and use proceeds from the sale of the gas system to pay off those debts now. Yes, sir.
Bob, is that's just the actual lease debt? That's not the purchase out of it? Are we going to purchase out of it?
We're going to have to purchase out of it, but what we're going to, what you see is only 40% of that, okay? So we're going to have to pay 102%, according to Bank of America. We're going to have to pay 102% of the par value of that. I think we're going to have to pay off about $2 million. So, 2% is less than the $20 million that it's going to take to get the system compatible with the Railroad Commission. So that debt will go away. Obviously, the revenues from the gas system are also going to go away.
Can you clarify on the 2014, we have nothing there?
Yes.
So they have been paid off?
No. If you go back up to the debt, the second table, right there. We allocated 100% this year of that to be paid from taxes.
I understand.
So a portion of this number is going to get paid off by the gas system. Proceeds. When you go through your budget system this year, your budget process this year, and when you go through it in future years, you always maintain the flexibility to adjust those percentages however it is that's in the interest of the city.
That is really nice. That flexibility is great.
Yes. So now if we can go to this debt capacity. That tab, please. There we go. This is the fun stuff. And this is the only thing I can speak today of with confidence because we're gonna talk about the legislation here in just a minute. We adopted last year 16.975 cent IMS tax rate. I don't know why can we widen these columns? I don't know how that got. There we go. Okay, so 16.975 is what your current IMS tax rate is. I was asked by senior administration to just for hypothetical purposes have an increase of 1 cent in that rate. I know I'm being redundant, but we can get that 1% in one of two different ways. One is issue new debt. Another way is to simply reallocate the debt service on your existing debt and raise it up that way. So whether we issue new debt or not, you have the latitude to decide what you want to do with that tax rate. You'll notice here that your adjusted over 65 freeze for 2020 for the fiscal year ending 2025, which was your 24 tax year, is $2,333,000. Now it's $2,536,000. This is just a certified estimate. We won't get the final rolls until July 25th. That's an increase of about, like I said, 8.7%. We used this number in 379,000 to get to that 16.975 cents. This $520,000 number is a plug figure, and I came up with this plug figure last year before y'all raised the IMS, and what it was we looked at the $1,400,000 in over 65 freeze tax collections that you get. We took a percentage of how much of that money of your existing tax rate was M&O, how much was IMS, and $520,000 was for IMS. That number has gone up, number one, gone up to $1,545,000 based on the certified estimate we got Friday or Thursday. And the percentage allocation between the M&O side and the INS side has changed, as Robbie's presentation showed. It's now 42%. So that number could be $600,000. That gives you some more plug. If I use the same methodology this year that I used last year, that $520,000 number would be slightly over $600,000. Why does that make any difference? Here's what we're talking about. What is your debt capacity? And if we could lower this, I want to show them the footnotes. There we go. What we're doing is growth in tax base assumed to be 5% for 27, 4% for 28, 3% for 2 years, 2%, and then constant thereafter. Current tax rate assumed is 98%. The allocation of frozen taxes based on calculations provided by the tax assessor collector. That number would be the $600,000. Applied funds is a combination of delinquent taxes and occurrence of estimated penalties and interest. So that number could arguably be as much as $640,000, just so you know you've got there. Now here's the big one. I highlighted it in yellow. Debt capacity calculations assume 20-year structures at 4.5%. And with all of these assumptions, these are the estimated excess cash flow and how much debt we could issue. You could this year issue in July of 25, $8.25 million out of that $626,000. But that assumes a 20-year structure at 4.5%. Now we know that a lot of the money that you're looking at in terms of needs could be vehicles and equipment that aren't going to have a useful life of 20 years. And we don't want to borrow money for longer than the useful life. So that number would fall if we assumed 7 years instead of 20 years. That number would fall from 8.25 to about 3.8 million. And the same thing is true all the way down. So we've got $52 million of overall debt capacity if we were looking at 20-year deals, and not all of them are going to be 20-year deals. We can access 15 million of that over the course of the next 2 years really would not have anything we could do in 27, but then another 5 million in 28, and then 32 million in 29. And again, it has to do with this debt falling off so dramatically from 3,450,000 to less than 1.2 million. That's where your real debt capacity comes from. That is the good news. The bad news is there is all the talk you hear about the uncertainty of the future coming out of Washington, D.C. because of the tariffs. And Robbie touched on that briefly when he talked about the Federal Reserve comments on April the 19th. That uncertainty pales in comparison to what's going on in Austin right now. There is House Bill 19 that is before Ways and Means Committee right now as we speak. Everybody under the sun was expecting a substitute bill to be filed this weekend, and it wasn't. So they're taking up House Bill 19. What does House Bill 19 do? It basically eliminates the ability for the city of Rockport to issue debt. How crazy is that? The Certificate of Obligation Act was passed originally in 1971. It was primarily amended in 1979. And what the Certificate of Obligation Act did was to remedy the unintended consequences of some legislation that was passed in Texas back in the 1930s that required revenue bonds to be voted, or debt to be voted. And you take a city like Rockport, as opposed to even a Victoria or a Corpus Christi, let alone Dallas or Houston, is you do not have the utility system revenues, the critical mass in terms of the number of customers that you had and the cash flow that you had to be able to issue straight up revenue bonds. So the Certificate of Obligation Act was created to provide credit enhancement by allowing a tax secured pledge on top of what was typically revenue transactions. So most of what the city of Rockport has done over the past 40 years, and this is true even for large cities like Houston and San Antonio, when it comes to certificates of obligation, it has been used to finance utility system improvements at more cost-effective rates because you were able to add the credit worthiness of your ability to levy taxes. What H. Bill 19 that they're taking up in Austin today says is that you're not going to be able to issue certificates of obligation at all unless there is an emergency declaration. And you don't get to decide what or who or which is the emergency. Only the state of Texas, the governor's office, can declare what's an emergency. Now, obviously, we had that in 2017, and we were able to do some things with respect to the financing for the city hall that we can't do today. So basically, they're saying that you can't issue certificates of obligation anymore if the House bill gets passed. Not only that, there is a separate provision in there that requires the calculation of what new values have been added in the last 3 years. And if you don't meet certain revenue thresholds in terms of new values for the last 3 years, you can't even issue voted bonds. We've got, my single largest client is Dallas ISD. I've got $2 billion worth of voted but unauthorized bonds at Dallas ISD. And based on House Bill 2019, we cannot even issue voted bonds. And according to Jay Juarez, the attorney that I spoke to this morning with Councilperson Horton, that is tracking this legislation, something along the lines of 70% of the governmental entities in this state, cities, counties, and schools included, will not be able to issue debt, period, under House Bill 19. So we go to the 3.5% no new money rate issue. You don't have a choice. You got to max out that 3% because you may not even be able to vote bonds to repair a water tower. That's how crazy it's gotten. One of the things that Robbie talked about was tax rate ratification election. You do have the ability to exceed the 3.5% on your M&O side if you take it to the voters and get it approved. This is a relatively new concept for cities and counties. We could only find one example, the city of Cibolo, that has voted one of these last year. It did pass. Georgetown, Laredo, Austin, El Paso are all anticipated to vote that this November. We don't have a lot of track record for the pass-fail because only one of them's been done so far, the city of Cibolo. However, there's something similar that's gone on with school districts for a number of years. And it's not really a tax rate ratification against the no new revenue limitations. But the school districts have had the ability for a number of years to vote what they call golden pennies, where they can vote additional penny taxes to their rates and have that money be exempt from offset by the Texas Education Agency when it comes to the per pupil revenues of the school district. Historically, those tax rate pennies, those tax rate ratification elections for school districts have passed at around 65 or 70%. However, last year in 2024, that pass rate dropped to right at 50%. So even the school districts are having difficulties. Our problem at Austin, probably get shot for saying this. There's not any newspaper reporters in here, is there?
No, but you're being broadcast.
I am in broadcast. Okay. Thank you. The politicians in Austin are trying to deliver lower tax rates to the citizens of Texas. And they have been attempting to do that for a very long time, for at least past 3 legislative sessions. There are among those politicians in Austin who are feeling frustrated that they haven't gotten as good a tax rate reduction as they had hoped because people were voting bonds, because people were issuing debt. And that's why we got the 3.5% new rate limitation. And that's why this House Bill 19 is really, being broadcast or not, the reality is the terms of House Bill 19 is going to make it very, very difficult for local governments to issue debt, even if the voters want it. Even if the voters go out and approve it, it's going to make it very difficult for you to issue debt. So, what does that mean? It's a practical reality. One of the things that Robbie talked about was utility rates. And because utility revenues are considered an enterprise fund, a business fund, you've got more latitude to raise water and sewer rates than you have to raise tax rates. You're obviously not going to raise sales tax rates. We're talking about property tax ratio. So we're going to have to max out 3.5% every year without fail, no matter what your fund balances look like, because you may have to build up fund balances to pay for capital infrastructure, these radios that we've talked about, as opposed to issuing debt for that. I think you're also going to have to look at I'll put it this way. You're also going to have to realize that one of the least restrictive revenue sources that you have that you can impact as an elected body is going to be your utility rates. And we may be transferring, going back to the previous slide, we may be transferring more and more of your debt service to your INS tax rate, which is not subject to the new revenue limitation, freeing up cash flow in your utility fund to, quite frankly, probably had to do interfund transfers from your utility fund back to the general fund just to be able to provide services to your citizens. The vehicles and equipment thing, we could do 7-year tax notes and keep those short. I'm not clear what House Bill 19 is going to do to your ability to issue tax notes. According to the lawyer I spoke to this morning, He thinks it's gonna restrict it, but not be as restrictive as the certificates of obligation. What's not been restricted, interestingly enough, is the PPFCOs, personal property finance corporations. The ability to issue debt to fund certain real products, certain real projects through basically a city-owned corporation that would own the project and then lease it back to the city. For example, I know the mayor's been in law enforcement. There are juvenile detention facilities that have been financed through those types of things. The city of Yoakum actually had to finance a school that way. It's an expensive thing to do because now you're talking about real estate transactions instead of a bond transaction. And you're talking about interest rates that are 25 to 35 basis points higher than you would have to pay on a bond transaction. But these are the things you have to be able to work through to continue to provide services for your citizens at the level that you as elected body want to provide services to your citizens. I guess that's really it. Well, we're going to find out today what happens with House Bill 19 before you guys have a chance to look at whether you want to do a short-term tax note for those vehicles and equipment replacement fund. It may be 2 more weeks, could be early June, the way the state legislature, usually they'll recess around the 3rd or 4th of June, something like that. I think it's going to be late May or early June before they recess. We may be that long before we can find out if we're going to be able to do tax notes. So, good news is you got great capacity, your tax values are going up, your debt is paying off. Bad news is Austin's not cooperating. Austin's making things, in my view, unnecessarily difficult.
Bob, last year, towards the end, we talked about restructuring or refinancing. We looked at some of those opportunities. Does that make sense anytime?
Well, some of this debt is callable and we'll be able to refinance it at interest rate savings if interest rates cooperate. One of the things last year, our interest rates were much lower than they are now. We saw the inflation rate drop from 2.8% down to 2.4 or 2.7% down to 2.4%. But as you know from 5 o'clock news, Chairman Powell has not lowered interest rates, despite the fact that European central banks have lowered interest rates. And we're not in an interest rate environment that makes sense.
So we're to do it.
You've got call dates, got the flexibility from a legal perspective to do it. We don't have the flexibility right now from an interest rate perspective to do it.
Well, if it doesn't make money sense, there's no reason to do it.
No, don't want to do it, but then doesn't say the city money, don't want to do it. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
That was my main question.
Y'all got nothing?
Well, that was my main question, was if anything can change from last year to this year on the restructuring or we look at some of that.
Nothing's changed there. I could speak for another half hour on some of the things that HB 19 wants to do, and probably just irritate everybody. But for another one is you have a bond election and it fails. Parts of this legislation will extend the amount of time. Historically, you could bring the same proposition back in 2 years. They want to extend it to 5 years. So if you have a bond election and it fails, you can't even bring it back to your voters for 5 more years. Was one of the questions I asked the bond attorney this morning that I don't have a good answer for. He didn't have a good answer for it, and I don't have a good answer for it. Is what happens if you do the tax rate ratification election and it fails? Is there a limitation on how many years you can have to pass before you can have a second tax rate ratification election? I don't know the answer to that. That's great. You would think you'd be able to do it every year because you have to set your tax rates every year. But there's so many things that are going on that just don't make any sense right now.
Is there an accompanying Senate bill with this one?
I'm sorry?
Is there an accompanying Senate bill?
They're trying to reconcile. I think that House Bill 119 is the one where they're trying to reconcile. I think it is a reconciliation, but they were expecting, as I understand it, and again, I'm not a lawyer and I'm certainly not a lobbyist, but as I understand it from the lawyers I spoke to and our internal people is they were expecting a substitute legislation this weekend to take out some of these more extreme prohibitions. But I mean, the two big ones are you can't issue COs for anything unless the state has declared an emergency. And the other one is that because of these ratios that they want to put into place, 60 or 70% of the entities in this state could be prohibited from issuing debt, even if their voters approve it.
It just seems to me like that. If it's voter approved, it seems like that trumps the legislation, and/or you look at it.
Right.
Supreme, is this constitutional?
Well, and there's been a lot of questions about constitutionality, because another thing and I believe it's gone by the wayside at this point, at least is evolved, was that they wanted to have bond elections require a supermajority. They were going to have to pass by 66 2/3%. And of course, you ask a politician, you want your election to be based on 66 2/3 instead of 50%, But I think somebody raised the issue of the constitutionality, and now they say, okay, well, we can't place that on the voters, but we'll make the elected bodies have a supermajority of the board to even call a bond election. So what that creates is a situation where a minority on the city council, or particularly a county commissioner's court, because there's only five people on a commissioner's court, a minority can stop an election from even being called. So just a lot of different things that are going on with 19.
Of course, is a co-sponsor.
It's just hard to, hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have, maybe even the end of the day, we'll have some idea of how serious the politicians are in Austin about actually passing this thing in its current form. It's just hard. I've been doing bonds for 43 years. It's just hard to imagine the state government saying, even if your voters want this, they can't have any of it. That just doesn't make sense to me. But that's where we're at.
Without any relief on how to run your city, without the state giving you funding to.
And that's the bigger issue. I mean, never mind debt. How are you going to be able to run this city when you've got 3.5% no new money limitations? You've got an inability to issue debt to fund capital improvements. If you can't issue debt, what do you got to do? You got to pay as you go. How are you going to pay as you go?
You're capped at 3.5%.
If you're capped at 3.5%, it doesn't even include, take up inflation. Where are you going to go? Utility system revenue, which, I'm a cheap guy. I would much rather pay $1,000 a year extra in property taxes than pay $1,000 extra in utility bills, because then you get to write off your property taxes on your federal income taxes and you get some relief there. So, but anyway, any other questions?
Anybody in the back?
Do we anticipate issuing debt this year? We're not working on it for the meeting.
I think we have to.
So there's something we have to do.
Should we do it now?
Yeah, do we have to do it fast to keep ahead of?
Well, historically, which doesn't seem to mean anything anymore, historically, when legislation gets passed in Austin, the effective date is like September the 1st. And so even if we get bad news out of Austin, we may be able to get some debt done before September 1st. They may try to make it effective immediately. I don't know. Just depends on what gets passed and what the effective date they put on it.
What's the time frame to issue that?
Well, if we're talking about tax notes and there's nothing that changes our ability to do that, we don't have to give notice of intent in the newspaper. We can probably get it done in 6 or 7 weeks.
There is also legislation to change all bond or any kind of kind of debt elections to November.
That's another aspect of it. Now, that one seems, you know, they were hot and heavy on that, you know, a month ago. I haven't heard anything about that in at least 2 or 3 weeks, so hopefully that's gone by the wayside. But there are just a lot of negative things in House Bill 19 is, again, it's just hard to understand what the motivation is, other than they just want to force tax rates lower across the state. But, you know, you gotta have some taxes to provide services.
Well, I think everybody would love to see a little tax relief, but how do you operate if you can't?
But there's no proposal on, I don't know, giving the city some of their massive reserve to make up the difference, or?
The massive reserves, I think, are going to school voucher program.
Okay,
That's a whole different subject.
yeah, calling the state to fix roads. Hey, is that it? It's easy this year, y'all. We have lunch coming. I guess we could talk about our new programs and how we prioritize and what we finalize. You can do that, or?
The COLA?
No, all the stuff that was submitted for,
Oh,
let's walk through them.
for their new initiatives.
Yeah, new initiatives. We'll talk about them just a little bit because you have to eat your lunch. We had everybody, every department, like we do every year, submit their priorities.
Vanessa, excuse me for interrupting. Do you need me to stay here?
No, sir, thank you very much.
I'll drive on back to San Antonio. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. See you guys.
Are you gonna be here Wednesday?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
I was gonna stay, but things have come up.
okay.
I'll be back 11 a.m. on Wednesday.
You're buying lunch, right?
Somebody is, we'll put it on the wheel.
I'm teasing.
Because they, since you got the original, so you were 2 of them. Okay. So we just sent it out to your shop. So I had to explain it in there.
So when submitting our new programs, we tried to talk about revenue generating programs. Unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of opportunities to generate revenue. One-time purchases that, so yeah, we divided in one-time ongoing, which would include personnel and vehicles, and then capital purchases, kind of the same on these two, or could be. One-time purchases, the number one that came in was our gas tank removal. We have to remove that this year, or we have to start paying a fee, a fine, something. So, we're gonna have to draw this 100,000 from somewhere. Number two was electric at the range, at the shooting range. Don't shoot us yet. If we get electric out there, we think that Brittany can use this to generate some revenue. So that was number two on this, because it also will serve the 40 acres that we've been holding on to. Number three was moving Encode back on premises. We had budgeted for that a couple years ago, but it got pushed off, so the money was absorbed back into the budget. So we probably need to rebudget that again. I don't know how much IT time we have to do that, but that's number three. Ongoing and people. Wonder what happened to my number one.
It's up there, it's
You
from.
got to raise it.
Oh, I erased it because it was the COLA. So number one across the board is a COLA. Number two is a network administrator. We have a new building coming on. We've gotta do something about it. So that's number two. Number three was a payroll HR person. Pretty self-explanatory. 5 new officers. Chief is asking for 5. He wanted to see if we could get one in this year. I don't know that it's gonna be possible, but we'll look at numbers later. We talked about the grant program that we didn't get, but, so we're just gonna go with 5 for next year. A mulcher, a commercial mulcher, we think we can get a savings of 10% of what we're currently spending, right now, if we do that. And then the judge needs the Encode program so that Christy can be in one program and work and not in 2. Capital projects. VFD pump station, 250,000, what is that?
That's the electronics at the 188 pump station. That's just a rough estimate.
Okay, we need a new belt press, $500,000, that's at the, wastewater treatment plant. What is this, range upgrades, another 50,000 there, that's, a building, not a building. Utilities.
That's donated, that's water, septic, and
Electric's over here.
electric.
So we're also looking to see what's available on the 40 acres that we could possibly extend to the range. Number 4 is we need another equipment storage place for fleet because we have basically our vehicles sitting out in the sun rotting. Number 5 is an insert valve, something that Ryan was gonna play with. It's actually it's a tool. Basketball court cover, we had this in the unspent bond funds, but it was robbed for other things. And then Austin Street, 4 million. So what everybody's gonna do basically is submit, are we just submitting number 1s to council?
I think we should limit it.
Yeah, so everybody will submit their number 1. No, that's not right. Number 1s will be submitted in each category. We'll give you the whole list, but we'll prioritize. And then they'll have a narrative behind it. 1, how it links to your plan, and 2, what they're gonna do with it and why they need it, so, yes.
We'll also need, if we're gonna absorb the gas. folks.
Yes, so we have 5 or 7?
There's actually 7 with Jan.
Okay, so we have 7 employees. Are we fully staffed?
In the gas department?
Mm-hmm.
No, we haven't renewed any of the fees, I think.
Okay, how many employees do we have in the gas department on staff? So we have 7 positions.
You don't have,
We have 7
so
positions.
you have some people working, there's staff more, right?
There's 7 people currently on staff.
Okay.
But we have, how many in that structure, what she's asking?
How many positions are available?
In our other departments?
No, gas.
The supervisor position never got filled, one of the maintenance techs is vacant, and then we transferred one of the operator positions to a maintenance tech. So 2 technically, if you want to
Okay.
say the supervisor and the.
Okay, so we have 7 positions filled. We have 9 total. Of those 7, we know we want to absorb, we want to absorb them all, right? Jan will keep doing what she's doing, basically. She has enough to fill a full-time position. We also have a contract with the guy to run it. What's his name?
Yeah, those are,
The contract will fall off.
yes.
So essentially, we have to repurpose 6 people if we're gonna keep them all.
We have 6 FTEs open in the city right now.
Not in, how many FTEs do you have open that you could fill, approximately?
We have 2 that they currently have hiring records out to.
Yeah, we
They
don't
haven't
have,
been filled yet.
So you have 4 open positions?
In between public works and parks.
So we're gonna be full. mostly.
Do you have any open positions?
We, are about to have 3, we're 1 right now, 2 people are leaving soon.
Okay, sorry, parks, do you have open positions? Doesn't have anything open either, so. We're looking at paying those off the top because we won't get any revenue.
But we did talk about, you know, if we were to work them, if they fall off, those,
Right, we wouldn't refill, you know, so like if Ryan had added 2 gas guys, he would be 12 plus 2, and as those plus 2s fall off, we don't fill them. So, that's probably gonna absorb almost everything that we can grab on the 3.5%. Would be those 5 people or more.
It'd be, help me, was it 300,000?
It was 386,000, I believe, is for all 6 of the guys.
3.5% gets us about 500,000.
Oh, 46%.
No, for the gas. Our 3.5% from raised taxes gives us about $500,000.
I'm looking, what I was looking at was probably about
9.
900. That coal is gonna be, though, about 6
Okay.
alone.
Okay. So those things chew up our extra money quickly.
there is gonna be opportunity out there.
Yes.
With the hiring entity, whoever gets, purchases it.
Whoever
They will
purchases-
be soliciting, our employees, which is gonna be strictly up to the employee, what's best for their family and their situation. We just wanna make sure that we have their back, because, they've been doing a good job for us.
Oh, that's a
When we
commitment we
really-
kind of made at the beginning of the sale, that everybody would leave it with a job, whether they go with the new purchaser or stay with us, so.
For that potential, if they, go with the buyer, then, that cuts that down. But at the end of the day, we just wanna be loyal to our employees, because they're loyal to us.
So there's a double-edged sword. We want to, but we still have to be fiscally responsible, but
Unless we absorb them. If we can absorb them instead of add them, that's ideal.
right. So, all right, are there any questions over these items? Nothing? Y'all are awful quiet. You're not, lunch doesn't come till 11:30. So,
You said going and pushing them, the ones.
well, I'm gonna give you the whole list, but they'll be prioritized. If we get anything, this is the one we want. This group back here sat together and decided of everything, this is the number 1 we want. This is the number 1 we want. This is the number 1 we want. Looks like the Ryan show, but whatever. So just know that that's not me, that's not a unilateral decision or anything. The group as a whole made those decisions. I don't anticipate us getting anything past number 1. On these one-times, if we have some flex money at the end of the year, we'll say, go buy them, go buy them. In fact, we took some things off of the list because it's like, you can pay that out of your budget right now, pay it. So, if we can knock these things off, if the chief and Brittany can find $22,000, they need to go do this. It won't come to you as a new program. But, the anticipation is that we only get number 1. And let me go ahead and write here.
Coal and gas, I guess.
Yeah. You'll see everything that's on this board, I think. I mean, unless someone just says, yeah, I'm not writing that up, because we're not gonna get there, but you'll see the write-up on it, you'll see what they're gonna do with it. If there's a benefit, you'll see the benefit. There has to be a benefit, and then it'll tie back to this, and we'll also tie back to our leadership plan as well. So.
A lot of these you saw last year too.
Yep.
So these don't come off the list, and we understand, but we have to have a list, so, they carry over each year, and then the priorities change, for sure.
Right.
That's what I'm wondering, I guess, Ryan, the CIP stuff, is like, we've seen we have seen some of these multiple years in a row, and they haven't fallen off, we haven't done them. But do they need to be reprioritized? If it's always a number 5, 6, or 7, the past 3 or 4 years.
You gotta,
So we reprioritize every year.
No,
and I want you to understand, like, I'll throw across this, say, Brittany will put her number 1 up there.
Right.
I put my number 1 up there, which was probably Austin Street, you know, or one of them. But as a group, the chief votes on that too, like, hey, we can get by. You know, I have to show what we need to do in the next 10 years.
Right.
So as a group, we come up with, you know, the VFD, because if it goes down, you're gonna pay for it anyways. You know, we can still drive on Austin Street, you know, or just, you know, we can play in the sun with the basketball court. So it's a wish list for sure. You just need to know that. If it's immediately breaking down, it's gonna be up at the top. You know, that's kind of where we're at.
But the directors all have to stand in front of their coworkers and say, this is why I need it.
Is this a
And
must?
I'm gonna tell you right now, they are so good at looking at the picture holistically and saying, yeah, we're fine. I don't think there was,
Shelley's.
well, I was gonna say
She was
that.
doing it for council, but we didn't think council really did anything.
And for the most part, everything was a unanimous decision. Yeah, that is what we need the most. Shelley held out on every vote for just FOIA, but that's a different discussion for us. So
With the ADA, we're gonna look at paying.
we have to become ADA compliant on our website. It's gonna be $2,500. It's gonna be an ongoing cost of $2,500. It just has to happen. We can't do anything about it. So, she's gonna get that done, but this just FOIA, yeah, it would make everybody's job easier, but it's gonna cost money, it's gonna cost money over years. We'd rather give a COLA. So, I mean, there's everything up here, there's a benefit, there's a need, there's, you know, I can tell you, if it made it to this board, it's needed.
Does council see
Period.
to add anything to the board?
Yep, do you guys have anything you want?
Like the hot topics that y'all get in your ward that, hey, this really needs to be fixed, because if we don't know about them, we most likely do, but I think y'all should have y'all's input on there so we can either get it on a CIP list and bringing that to the table and prioritizing that before we get to the
I would
Excellent
love to
point.
see something with Austin Street. I know we've seen that a bunch, you know.
So we have it here, it's so far down because it's so expensive.
It's so the cost is.
I think this becomes a TERS project. I think we put it to the TERS board and say we want to put this in the TERS project.
But we don't see that for 10 years.
No.
Well,
No. This, if the city is gonna do it, we can borrow against the TERS. A private development cannot borrow against the TERS. So, yes, that development is gonna bring money that we're working with or potentially working with, but there's also gonna be just natural increase that's also gonna have another pot of money that we can borrow debt against.
You'll also see some of these fall off because we're actively throwing these at grants.
Yep.
Yes. So just to know, like that whole list, every department is looking for a grant for all these. And if we can get that, we'll utilize that. I mean, we have stuff for moving the light poles off of, you know, Austin Street. So we're actively trying to cut that number down.
Every day.
Through grants, and Kimberly's working that, and, you know, and all the department heads, but it's all, like, it all comes together. We're looking for ways to fund this without having it to be on this list right now, so.
Okay, do you guys wanna add anything here?
I know Ryan, he is working well with the country club, that is my biggest.
Getting them to see the whole picture of the whole system was really instrumental, and Ryan did a good job of putting the map on the wall and saying, look, you got $800,000 worth of drainage. This is what it does. You're part of a system. You know, everything in this county kind of flows through everything else, and if you have a backup in one spot, everybody is in trouble, so, it was a good effort on his part.
So you know, that's on the CIP also.
What's
Like,
that?
Those, the Rockport Country Club.
Oh, yeah.
They're on, it's part of the CIP, but we were asked for our number ones.
Yep.
They did a good job, I don't think they need anything beyond top of
Well, I
right
mean,
now.
but just so you know, they're actively going for grants and sitting in a CIP list for the overall, because there might be 20 of them that aren't on that board. So
Yeah,
you
we
see the
can't-
overall list.
Everybody has a list of 20.
Yeah.
Of 20 things that they want. We know it's unrealistic, but if money starts flowing in, as these start falling off, we have new ones. We're just gonna keep going. Additionally, this year, we're updating our impact fees. That covers a lot of the CIP stuff that needs to be done as well. So that's a separate pocket, a separate pot of money, separate set of projects.
How is that going? Impact fees?
I think it's going really well. Carrie could give us an update. She just had a meeting with them recently.
Yes, and we have another meeting this week, Ryan and I, to go over the numbers of what the impact fees are going to possibly be. Of course, it goes to council for a vote, and they'll show us a maximum that we can charge, and you can choose to charge the maximum or somewhere in between. But those numbers are based off the CIP projects that we have in the impact fee CIP. And those funds are used for that CIP. So, yeah, some of this will go on.
And do you guys have like a timeframe for that?
I thought we would, but it's been taking longer than we thought it would, but we're really close.
Did you say you're gonna be getting the numbers this week?
Yes, this week,
Okay.
and then we'll take it to the PNC, which are the advisory committee. I'm hoping on May 5th, and they'll write a report, hoping on your next council meeting.
After that.
I'm not sure though if we have to post the public hearing first, so I'll find that out this week.
You'll be able to see the list of projects that we've chosen, you know, for water and sewer.
And I know one of the things that you guys wanted to do was open up water and sewer to the underserved areas. That's huge in that plan, what they've come through with.
It was mostly based on
Yeah, so,
expansion, bypass area, and running sewer and depths, and there's actual real numbers.
it's a good plan. Okay,
But it's almost there.
I'm excited.
all right. Okay. Anything else? Any more questions? Budgetary or otherwise? Okay, that's it then. That's all we have for today. Shelley, what'd you order for lunch?
We ordered pizza.
Okay, so if you want to stay and have pizza, you're welcome to. If not, you're free to go.
Do you want to tell them what's in it? Oh, menu?
Oh, also, yeah, I printed 20 copies of the budget calendar, so if anybody doesn't have it, hasn't seen it,
Oh,